With no further ado, I'll turn. This is also exciting for me because my kids, and both Clay and Corinne, were on the same boys and girls team, and it's impressive to see what community-minded people they turned out to be, and really excited to have them in the community. So, Corinne, it's all yours. Clay, if you want to take the other one. Please don't let this be a distraction either. What I'm going to pass around while they're talking is an actual larvae of a emerald ash borer and the adult, and it'll make more sense once Corinne explains how they live and what they do. I'm going to pass one around here, and one will circulate here, but if I can make sure I get them back.
Yeah, you can have them back.
Please.
Thanks for the nice introduction, Mike. As Mike said, I did 100% inventory of all ash trees on city property and also inspected the trees for symptoms of the emerald ash borer. So what is an ash borer? An ash borer is a small green beetle native to Asia. It attacks only trees in the genus Fraxinus, which most commonly around here is the green ash, as well as the white and black ash. The ash borer is an invasive species to the U.S., meaning it has no natural suppressors, such as resistant trees or predators. The ash borer was first discovered in the United States in 2002, and this is a quarantine map produced by the USDA this month. And this shows how it's spread since 2002. The ash borer was first discovered in New York in 2009. And so how will this affect the city of Auburn? The first infestation in Cayuga County was found in Montezuma last year. Some females can travel up to 3 miles in their lifespan, so property is at risk within 10 to 15 miles of infection. And without control measures, all ash trees of an infected area are expected to die within 10 years. So first of all, how do you identify an ash tree? When looking at its form, it has a fan shape, meaning the branches towards the top point straight up to the sky, and as you go lower down to the tree, the branches bend towards the ground. As you also notice, the foliage is not very thick, so you can see the branches in between the leaves. Now this is just an example of a green ash tree, but the black and white ash are very similar. The leaf pattern of a compound leaf for the green ash tree has direct leaf crossings, so each leaf grows directly across from each other with one leaf at the tip. The bark of an ash tree is very distinctive with a coarse diamond pattern. How is an ash tree infected? The female deposits eggs along the trunk or major branch of a tree. The larvae bore through the bark and feed on the cambium tissue of the host. Now the cambium tissue is the part of the tree between the bark and the wood that brings water and nutrients from the roots throughout the rest of the tree. To emerge from ash trees, adults chew D-shaped holes and exit, feeding on leaves before dispersing to infect other ash trees. How does an infestation affect ash trees? As I mentioned, the tissue that brings water and nutrients throughout the tree is damaged. When this is disturbed, the tree's nutrients is choked off, and the tree starts to die within 2 to 5 years. Noticeable signs and symptoms of infection are serpentine galleries, D-shaped holes, canopy dieback, and dead limbs. So the first sign of infection are serpentine galleries. And you can see in the picture is a emerald ash borer larvae chewing through the cambium tissue. The eggs are deposited at the top of the tree, so as they work its way down, they form those serpentine galleries. And note, the only way you can see these is if you scrape off the bark of the tree. D-shaped holes are formed when adult ash borers are emerging from the cambium tissue. These holes are only 1/8 an inch in diameter. Another reason why we didn't look for direct signs of infection, these are way too hard to see and get a complete inventory. So instead we looked at the symptoms of infection. So the first symptom would be canopy dieback. Once the cambium tissue is infected, all the nutrients can't reach the top of the tree, and therefore Beginning at the very crown of the tree, the leaves and branches start to die, and within years, they eventually work its way down and becomes a dead tree. Another sign along the similar line is dead limbs. Purple prism traps are used to detect and monitor the emerald ash borer. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the prism traps put up by the DEC around the city. These traps are hung relatively low to the ground and are purple in color because that attracts the female ash borer. There's a leaf alcohol scent also applied to these to mimic emerging green foliage. So when the ash borer is attracted to this, it sticks to the side of the trap. When taken down, the DEC individually plucks each insect and identifies the ash borer. Now this is important because the city hasn't had purple prism traps put up until this year, and they won't be taken down until September, so that's the first we'll know of any detection in the city of Auburn. So the data we collected was tree class size, the surrounding site, and the condition of health of each tree. So tree class size, instead of measuring the diameter of each tree, we broke it down into 5 class sizes to make things a little more efficient. A sapling, as everybody probably knows, is something you can fit your hands around. A pole-sized tree is about the size of a telephone pole. A medium-sized tree is slightly larger than that. A large-sized tree is the size of a large individual, and an extra-large tree is a monstrous tree, and if we saw any of those, we did go out and measure the diameter. We also looked at the surrounding site, noting anything that would be affected if limbs or the tree fell. So things we took note of were the curb, fire hydrant, sidewalk, and most commonly overhead utilities. And we distinguished this from the utilities in the public right-of-way as well as the service connection to buildings. We also took note of the condition of health of each ash tree, noting if they were healthy, had dead branches, if there was foliage loss, meaning sparse leaves all throughout the tree. Yellowing or browning leaves, as you see in the picture, is a dead leaf that's crumpled but hasn't fallen off the tree, and less commonly, stem damage. So where did we collect the data? We only collected data on city property, which is the tree lawn. That's the area between the sidewalk and the road. If there's no sidewalk in your area, it's any of the trees lined up near the road. We didn't look in anybody's front or backyards. That's a whole nother issue. Over 100 miles of residential and commercial roads were inventoried, as well as parks and playgrounds. How did we collect the data? I used an iPad app called PDF Maps that used high-resolution aerial imagery. The app allowed us to record latitude and longitude without connecting to Wi-Fi or satellites. So Clay was the one that drove around the city and identified trees, and when we spotted an ash tree, I would be following along with my PDF map. I would put a pin mark at the base of the tree, and then from there we assigned the attributes to that specific tree. As a result, over 1,000 trees were inventoried. So just to give you an idea of the distribution of each attribute, you'll note under the title of the slide our account for each individual class. So most commonly for the tree class size, we found medium and pole-sized trees. For the surrounding site, most trees had no utilities or anything in the way, with a close second of overhead utilities. The condition of health, the most trees were healthy, but there was a significant amount of trees with dead limbs, foliage loss, and yellowing and browning leaves. So just to give you guys an idea of scale, this is all of the ash trees in the whole city, but I'm going to zoom in on this small area so you guys can get an idea of what a larger scale does to this map. when in a larger scale, something that looks like 1 point may actually be 3 or 4 ash trees. So this gives you an idea of the magnitude of the problem. So for analysis, my first step was to sit down with Mike Talbot and Dr. Aikman and discuss the criteria for immediate action based on the characteristics of trees and their surroundings. Then I assigned numerical scores to the trees based on the relative importance of the criteria. And just to let you guys know, these are by no means a definitive set of criteria. The great thing about GIS is you can change the criteria when appropriate and run all of the analysis again, producing new maps. So a score of 1 to 5 was given to each tree. The trees with the higher scores are the ones that need most immediate action. And just to give you an idea, large and extra large trees would obviously be a priority because if limbs were to fall, they would cause the most damage. And then it's broken down between medium and pole-sized trees that are unhealthy with utility conflicts. And then, less importantly, the medium and pole-sized tree that are healthy with site conflicts, medium and pole-sized tree with no utilities and healthy. And finally, the least priority would be the sapling trees because they are so small. So just to give you guys an idea of the distribution of each priority score, you can look at the map and notice that it's pretty well distributed. Take note that trees next to each other don't necessarily have the same priority score. So the third step in my analysis was to determine the priority of each street segment for action based on the total scores of the trees along them. So for each street on this map, we added up the scores of each priority tree to form a priority street segment, which is a bit more practical when you're addressing the problem of treatment. And so, again, this is not a definitive priority, but something that can be changed after further discussion. The fourth step in my analysis was adding an additional point weight bonus to trees within a half-mile travel distance to schools. Because infected trees become brittle, there's a hazard of falling limbs, so we took into consideration school walking paths for children. Now, the reason why we chose a half-mile point distance from the schools is because a mile pretty much covered the whole city of Auburn, therefore defeating the purpose. And if you'll take a look, pretty much the street segments within the school bonus section got one higher rank priority. And if you'll note, all the lower priority street segments are green and progressing to the highest priority street segments, which are in red. So what are the options for action? Well, the first option would be insecticide treatment. There are many forms of insecticide treatment, but the most common are systemic insecticide treatments, meaning pistils get inserted to the base of the tree, and the tree actually brings those insecticides throughout the rest of the tree through the cambium tissue. It's important to note for any insecticide treatment, it needs to be repeated every 2 years. And by the time most people notice canopy thinning, the emerald ash borer has caused considerable vascular damage. These trees are not healthy enough to spread the insecticide through the tree and must be removed. Now, the second option for action is removal. And there is a possibility that the city could do something with this material if it's healthy, such as turning it into firewood or wood chips, but it must be complied with DEC regulations in order to prevent the spread of the ash borer. And finally, that's the final street segment priority map for my example, showing all the ash trees aligned along those roads. It's important to note that all ash trees within city parks were not taken into account for the street segment priority. that's a separate matter that the Public Works Department will have to deal with separately. And I just want to take this time to give